Сайн байцгаана уу хүн төлөөлөгчтэй. Өнөөдөр манай дефакто нэвтрүүлгийн зочноор Дэлхийн Банкны Монгол Улсыг хариуцсан менежер бөгөөд Суурин төлөөлөгч ноён Андрей Mikhnev оролцож байна.
Andrei Mikhnev Дэлхийн Банкны Монгол Улс хариуцсан менежер бөгөөд Суурин төлөөлөгч. Украиний иргэн Andrei Mikhnev 2019 оны 4-р сарын 1-ээс эхлэн Дэлхийн Банкны Монгол Улс дахь суурин төлөөлөгчөөр томилогдсон ажиллаж байна. Ноён Mikhnev нь Монгол дахь хамтрагч талуудтай Дэлхийн Банкны бодлогын хэлэлцүүлэг болон хэрэгжиж буй хөтөлбөрүүдийг удирдан ажиллаж байна. Ноён Mikhnev эдийн засгийн хөгжлийн салбарт 20 гаруй жил олон улсад ажилласан туршлагатай. Ойрох орнууд болон Персийн булангийн орнуудад өрсөлдөх чадвар ба хувийн хвшилтэд дөрөөлсөн өсөлтийг нэмэгдүүлэх зорилготой Дэлхийн Банкны хөтөлбөрийг удирдах байсан юм. Мөн ноён Mikhnev Латин Америк, Саб-Сахара Африк, Өмнөд Аз, Ойрох орнууд, Хойд Африк, Европ, Төв Азийн олон оронд эдийн засгийн реформ шинжилэл хийх чиглэлээр ажиллаж байв. Ноён Mikhnev нь Киевийн их сургуульд олон улсын эдийн засгийн докторийн зэрэг хамгаалсан. Тэрээр англи, украин, орч хэлээр чөлөөтэй ярьдаг бөгөөд мөн испани хэлний мэдлэгтэй.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, and thank you for inviting me to your studio here.
It's a great pleasure, and we will talk about that report which made me calling your office to ask you for this interview. Thank you very much for agreeing with that. And let's start our talk because now we need to update our view of cooperation of Mongolian government with the World Bank. How things go on so far?
Well, I think for the last few years in particular, we've been witnessing a good level of cooperation between the World Bank and the Mongolian government. We can go into details of that, but overall, I think for the last few years, we've seen different stages of the economic development in Mongolia. We've witnessed a fantastic growth, which started, I think, in 2017 for the last 2 years. And then, of course, earlier this year, the Mongolian economy has been facing the COVID-19 crisis. It's not only Mongolia, it's a global crisis, but actually it put additional challenges to Mongolian economy. And of course, it's reflected in the way how we cooperate with the Mongolian government and other stakeholders.
Before we go to this report, once you start to talk about that report, before we go, what was done due to the coronavirus situation and the challenges we face in the economy?
I think the COVID-19 really was taken seriously in Mongolia from the very beginning. And you can see that Mongolia is probably the only country in the world now when it's contained the COVID-19 only in the quarantine areas, and we don't have locally transmitted cases so far here in Mongolia, and many other countries suffering from that. So from what we believed, we wanted to be sure that we can provide support as soon as the COVID-19 pandemic started, right? And we used a combination of different instruments to do that. Our approach to supporting country response to COVID-19 was mostly threefold. First is really about saving lives and building the response to potential pandemic. In this regard, we provided fresh financing of almost 27 million from our fast-tracking pandemic facility. And this financing was prepared with really no time. And we are really happy that the Parliament of Mongolia also ratified this financing very fast in April this year. So that was almost 27 million directly for saving lives, because it will support it is supporting the buying necessary testing equipment, diagnostic equipment, protective equipment. So that's very essential. We also try to reprioritize some of our projects, like e-health project. So some money from these projects were channeled towards also this equipment is needed. So it's about saving lives. In addition to that, we provided 1 million grant to Mongolia, mostly helping those who are on the front line of dealing with COVID-19. like health workers or those working at the borders when they're trying to meet these passengers coming from abroad. So that was the first pillar, like saving lives. And that's, we provided this support about like 30 million, more than 30 million to that particular. The second pillar is actually protecting most vulnerable, because COVID-19 is not only about disease, it's about losing income of those who could suffer from that. I mean, like poor population, those who are self-employed businesses where the economy is going down and they're losing their income. So in this regard, we put together the measures which were very much aligned to what the government put in their stimulus package, approved also the parliament in April. In particularly, we provided quite a big support to the social insurance system. As you know, the stimulus package provided a relief from paying social insurance for quite a long time.
Just to give jobs.
To ensure to give jobs, and the businesses and employees have some income to save over this month. But at the same time, social insurance system, social welfare, needs to pay unemployment benefits, pension benefits, other types of benefits, disability. So where this money could come from if the businesses and employees are not paying. So that's why we decided to provide about 25 million directly to the social insurance system.
It is a loan or?
It's a concessional loans, yes. This is the concessional loans which could be used during this crisis time to ensure that this social insurance system is continuing working. And it's
when you talk about concessional loans, just to make clear the terms about of this particular, usually the concessions loans, please.
As far as I remember correctly, because we have different instruments for different loans, but on average it's about 2% of the interest rate, and that there is a grace period over which there is no payment for the first period, and then maturity is quite significant. Yeah, so that's, I mean, I always was saying like this type of loans that probably everyone will be happy to receive because it's very, and also this type of loans which are available for Mongolia, which cannot be gotten on the open markets globally. So that's why international development institutions are providing these concessional loans, which would help Mongolia to develop.
So it's protecting the most vulnerable, second.
Yes. And then the third pillar that we're saying that we need to ensure that there is a basis for recovery. So what could be done to ensure that the economy is not falling really, but once these immediate needs of saving lives and protecting the poor are done, then we can actually ensuring that its recovery program would continue. So in this regard, and sorry, I just need to look at some of these things. We have some projects which are looking at how the businesses could recover. For instance, we just restructured the export development projects, where we put a lot of efforts now and financing for ensuring that export-oriented, non-mining SMEs have better opportunity, not only financial opportunity, but also knowledge opportunity to bring their product to the foreign markets and generate some income for that. And therefore having their products a little bit more competitive. Right? It's all about competitiveness. So in this project, we also provided about 1.5 million actually to to support the stimulus measures provided by the government to relieve the small businesses mostly for some fees and payments that they could pay. Right? In addition to the overall project of 18 million, supporting actually making it more affordable for non-mining sector to think about their growth.
Do you have a say to which project particular this kind of export support financing goes?
It's what we did. It's all projects, all the non-mining sectors which are export-oriented, have potential already and need some kind of either trade financing or need support in increasing the quality of their products, they're all eligible. The preference is giving to those who engage in so-called productive partnership. So when you have a cluster of enterprises rather than just one enterprise, to ensure that you have support on all stages on your value chain. I visited one project here. I don't want to have like advertising for this particular company, but it was a small Kashmir production company which benefited from this project already, and they really used the financing through this project to buy necessary equipment, and they are now exporting a lot of Kashmir products to a couple of countries outside, in addition to selling it here. But it's not the biggest Kashmir company, just an example.
Yeah, very interesting work during this COVID. World Bank extended to Mongolia. Speaking about out of this three, just for the sake of our one particular point you have mentioned about trade financing. How do you find the trade management in the country? We don't have, for example, particular ministry for trade.
Right.
So we have a department. And then also trade financing issue, which is possible when the government has a particular policy on traders. How do you find that situation of trading in Mongolia?
Right. I think let's put these questions in few, right? So I think the institutional arrangements about the trade is different in different countries. Right? In some countries, you do have a separate ministry responsible for trade, and in Mongolia, for external trade, it's mostly Ministry of Foreign Affairs responsibility, when they have a separate department for that and supporting, which again depends on the needs of the economy. In some bigger countries, you have like more government agencies. In a smaller economy, you don't need to have that many of them. I think the key issue is how effectively it's working, right? And how effectively such institutions supporting trade opportunities for the domestic producers abroad. So that's on institutional things. I think in specifically supporting that, as you know, we have, as part of World Bank Group, we have International Finance Corporation. Yes. Which is really the private sector arm working a lot on the on development of the private sector, particularly. The IFC just launched a project about green financing along the value chain, and then the financing mechanism to ensure that it's more focusing on the green financing. So that's a good example how we as a World Bank Group is actually looking at that, supporting. On the policy level, we have been supporting the government, again, through IFC, helping to create the trade portal, which would be like a one-stop information about trade opportunities and rules and regulations that involves for the external trade. Done already this
Yes,
yeah, it's a launch the project, but we're still supporting that, and we want to be sure it was sustainable.
It's working.
Yes, yes. So what I'm also saying that, as far as I remember from my IFC colleagues, is that they release so-called time and release study, which is providing very detailed information of how much it costs actually to get the goods through the customs, through the border, and what could be done to improve it. So I think this study is also available on the internet, or is about to be available on the internet. That's also important to figure out. But the key policy issues, I believe, is just to ensure that in addition to being a part of international trade architecture, which is WTO, and also in addition to being part of different agreements, like trade facilitation agreement, for instance, which Mongolia is, I think it's important to ensure that at the micro level, Mongolian exporters have the capacity and have the competitive edge to compete in the foreign market. I think that's what's a very important issue to focus on.
And yet we don't much doing it in terms of export earnings, as 90% of our export is consisting of minerals,
True.
And out of that 80%, only to one country. And today we have, in spite of our very high level of relationship with our neighbors, it's very hard for us to export our products. Why is that? It's very much high. They have import taxes. So how do you find that in terms of what you do to facilitate?
I think that's exactly the point you correct one. You caught this, the essence of the report, on which we probably will have time to talk a little bit. Yeah. But it's really looking about how to, instead of being addicted to such wealth based on minerals, how to ensure that you can capitalize on that, and how you ensure you can diversify, not from mining, but diversify in terms of benefiting and maximizing the benefits of natural endowment, which is a minerals.
Which is a long time due in this country. And by the way, let's talk about that. And according to this, your Mines and Minds report in Mongolian, all uurhai, байгаа, oюун, ухаан, very clearly show where are those weak points in Mongolia, and there are certain proposals how to change the situation. And a particular quote, that attracted my mind was that you said here in this report, only 1% of all those earnings since 2004, Mongolia had spent somehow for their future generations. And safe, yes. And the remaining, say, 99%. Yeah. So now the issue is coming. What is the efficiency of those mining spendings? Please elaborate a bit about that.
Okay, let me probably give, when we're moving to this report, giving a little bit perspective and then going straight to your specific questions about that. I think this report is not one which is produced every 6 months, right? That's very important for your audience also to understand. I think the last report was produced more than, such in-depth report was produced more than 10 years ago, right? So it's really the report which is looking at the sources of growth and development path using the time series going way back. And it's not an assessment of any specific government or not assessment of any specific short period of time on any specific actions introduced, right? It's important to understand, because to see the pattern over the time, you need to look really for the long of data. So that's all. And this finding of this report, main finding is confirmed that despite many efforts, overall the trend remains that addiction to the mineral wealth and reliance mostly on mines continues to be a fact, right? And then the figure you put, about 90% of export revenues is coming from the mineral sector. That's a good indication that it's still the case. However, report doesn't argue against mining sector or against this important sector for the economy. I think the report is arguing that in order to be sustainable over years, you need to build foundation for human and institutional capitals. So once the mining sector becoming less and less a main source of growth, you have this foundation already to ensure sustainability of your growth. Let's imagine that in 10 years, coal is not used anymore globally, because that way, right? Anyway. So then if you're only investing in coal production, infrastructure for that, and continuing exploration only for that, then in 10 years you may face a situation, well, you still have coal, but nobody wants to buy it. Or some other countries globally, like I've been working in the Middle East, like Yemen, for instance, they utilized all the oils they have used, and they came to the situation, well, no more oil left for them to export. So that's why a report is really looking as like, look, you need to capitalize on this mineral wealth currently you are accumulating. And saving for future generation, it's one of the points when you really can ensure that this wealth is saved for future generation. So when we did the calculation of 1 cent for each dollar generated through the mineral wealth, we mostly look at two funds, the stabilization fund and the future heritage funds. and we try to have like a net savings, how much they have, and this is how we came out with this 1 cent for every dollar that was accumulated from the mineral wealth. Right? And it's a striking number actually, because I didn't even know like before this that this was such a striking number. I think it shows us that there might be good thinking needs to be put in how to manage this cycling of the economy to make a counter-cycling measures. So exactly, you save when you have like a boom, and you try to use this saving somehow to mitigate the bust of the mining economy when it's going there.
Many people think differently.
So yeah, that's what we believe in the report is one of the key things to ensure. And then we also see that when you're talking about important point about diversification, there's a lot of discussion how to diversify economy. In fact, there are a lot of good examples also how you can diversify economy. The World Bank issued quite a good report a few years ago about the European and Central Asia diversification efforts. And I think one of the key points was that you don't need just to take investment from mining sector, just purely put, let's say, in another sector. That may not work. You need to ensure you have assets like infrastructure, like human capital, like institutional capital, which is really could be recipient of that and supporting this diversification. So actually then you have, if mining sector is going down, you may see that other sectors could pick up and balance that out.
You highlighted the particular missing point that infrastructure, not only the road, but the labs, schools, knowledges, then the people. What are the most vulnerable part in that sense in Mongolia? I mean that in order to have our products competitive on the international market, for example, let's talk, once we talk about mines, we talked recently about possible exporting knowledge in the sense of application, IT, etc. What is your take on that? Do we have any future? What are they missing? What is the link, weakness of industry and science research here?
Well, of course, we believe in the future of Mongolia and the Mongolian people. And that's why we put a lot of efforts to try to analyze what should be done to maximize the human capital potential in Mongolia. What we notice, though, that there are a lot of well-educated people who are looking for well-paid jobs. And it's not that many exist in Mongolia. So they're looking for opportunities abroad. So instead of contributing to Mongolia development, they see opportunity in contributing to economies in other countries, which is not bad, of course. You can also claim that, oh, you're exporting the brain. I just recently through LinkedIn had a question from one of young Mongolian who is now in Canada. Actually, he started working for a Canadian development agency, and he is asking genius question like, how can I support my country? So I think there are a lot of Mongolians who would like to work here, but opportunities for jobs, well-paid jobs, is really not that much for the most brightest of your minds, right? So the effort should be done to ensure that you have more developed markets here, which can provide jobs that are interested to your best brain. Well, for that, I mean, it's not simple answer, of course, of that. I think jobs creation is at the top of the agenda of many countries, advanced countries or least developed countries. I think the key issue is like how to ensure you have a place here when employers would like to create more well-paid jobs. In this regard, we are coming to like issue of investment competitiveness. Investment competitiveness is actually looking at how the country competitive to attract investment, and not just the money, but like more efficiency-seeking investment. When you invest in the more value-added products or services, which could be competitive also globally. So if Mongolia is becoming a destination for investors, to create businesses here that could be produced for the quality goods globally, then it will create also the market for those who are now looking for such opportunities abroad.
Mostly out of many products people tried. I mean, Mongolian businesses try anyways. They try by all means. I recently also saw more, for example, Japanese companies, for example, outsourcing certain part of IT works in Mongolia, for example. We need to be very pragmatic, because everything what we possibly can create are being produced in either China or in Russia. So we need to be out trying those fields where we can be more competitive. It looks like more only IT services, communication services, don't you think?
Yes, I agree with you. And actually, I would encourage your audience to look at this year World Development Report that the World Bank produced, which is about the global value chains and how competitiveness of the countries could be enhanced through the value chain. So what happened before, you are competing on certain product, which you fully produce in one place, right? Nowadays, you don't need to have expertise, financing, and all the skills needed to produce fully the product. You may only participate in the part of that. And then another part could be done in other countries. Or some services could be done in other countries, like marketing for your product.
Who is doing that value chain, particular parts study that may be very comfortable or relatively competitive in Mongolia?
We didn't do like a specific study on the value chain analysis in Mongolia recently. We did look at a couple of sectors last year. So we have a report which is looking at some competitiveness aspects that I think it was mostly in Kashmir sector, right? Mostly benefiting that you have a lot of livestock here where the Kashmir could be produced. But then the main finding was that majority of this Kashmir was kind of didn't add value here, but was exported as
only
as
10% of Mongolian Kashmir gathered or collected. 10% are processed in Mongolia. So, the remaining we sell to mostly to China and Italy.
Yeah. But here, I think that's a good opportunity when you have add value to this particular product and can sell at much, much higher prices. So then benefiting you're here, then means your jobs would be better paid here. It means it also would be like revenue to the tax sector, to the through taxes coming. So adding value here instead of just looking at the production of somewhere in other countries, that's probably one of the priorities. It's also referring to the mining sector. A lot of minerals is just kind of very initial basic processing and then exported there. That's you also losing a lot of value that you can produce here.
Yep. Will there be any kind of research on the sectors, possibly on IT sectors, programming, application producing? Recently we got a new product that can Mongolian language audio can be printed into text automatically.
Right.
For example, the speech recognition technology. Will there be any kind of study in this field from your side, or if there you have been receiving requests from Mongolian side on that?
Not that we currently just have it now, right? We have a project which is called Smart Government Project, which has also been in operations for a couple of years, which is supporting different solutions in its support the digital development of Mongolia.
That any separate independent research institute in Mongolia is able to do so. So probably with your expertise, World Bank, that would be a good idea. Anyway, because the time is like this, and let me ask you my final questions about, you know, about poverty. we keep working and keep reporting a situation, okay, from 30 to 29% of the population now, etc., but still it is something that we cannot accept. You know, 1/3 of the population is under poverty. How do you find in general the work we do in Mongolia? Why this one is not going substantially down?
Right. I think you're correct in saying that for the last few years, the poverty rate was like stagnated. But if you look a little bit further, you can see that it's actually in the rural area, the poverty rate were decreasing, right? But in urban area here in Ulaanbaatar mostly,
because
this is
keep moving.
Exactly. So, and I think the most those who are really looking for income opportunities, they are moving to Ulaanbaatar and not necessarily finding good jobs here immediately. So that's why, while rural level of poverty kind of improved, the urban poverty was like the same, stagnating. So that's the first issue. The second issue is that you need also to look at the level of poverty. 28% it's mostly reflect the national level of poverty calculated here. But if you can compare, for instance, with the international extreme poverty, which is less than $1.9 a day, then Mongolia is actually having less than 1% people living. It's really almost negligible comparing to some other countries.
By which measure 29% comes?
28% is reflecting the national poverty line, so people living below the national poverty line. And it's important to understand, if you have like just absolute figures, like we have extreme poverty 1.9, it would not kind of really be fully compatible across economy, because economy are different, right? So if it's a poor, very poor country, let's say in sub-Saharan Africa,
or Yemen.
Yeah, then 1.9, it's really something to measure about and make measures. But if it's more like a national poverty line here, that reflects the economic situation in Mongolia.
$1.9 per person per day, right?
Yes.
And if by that comparison we go under 1%?
Yes.
Oh, okay, so we need then to explain more about what is the national poverty line's criteria?
Yeah, I'll tell you. But you need to remember that $1.9, let's say someone in the poor African countries, could buy more food, right, for the person than $1.9 in Mongolia, for instance.
That's true also, right? Yes.
So if they may, that's why you need to have like a national poverty line, which I think, I don't recall exactly, so we can check with my poverty team. I think it's about, in dollars, it's $5.5 a day. So it's quite significantly higher than national poverty.
You are right that Mongolia is now becoming an expensive country.
Yeah.
Salaries staying lower, the prices coming up, and the productivity is staying lower. Then people travel or go abroad for work.
Exactly. So, but the key point about the poverty, if I may, the last point, is really what's surprisingly that the growth was quite high, but the poverty did not reduce that high. That means it was not shared prosperity. So economy is growing, but not benefiting probably the poorest of the poor, because they remain in the same kind of income category. It's not translated in the income for the most poorer.
Inequality.
Yeah, exactly. So that's the big challenge that needs to be looked at in ensuring that it's more shared prosperity among all the people rather than just benefiting the richest one.
Well, you have been mentioning several reports which Mongolians, those who study economy or who is doing policy making, find and should find relevant and useful. So I think those people can go through this website, and I would like to thank you for very interesting dialogue, and I wish we have more time, but thank you very much again.
Thank you for inviting. I also like our discussion, and we're always open and sharing our views to mass media in Mongolia. Thank you very much.
We should have another round one day later.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. За хөнгөлөлттэй өнөөдөр манай де-факто нэвтрүүлгийн зочноор Дэлхийн Банкны Монгол Улсыг хариуцсан менежер бөгөөд Суурин төлөөлөгч ноён Андрей Mikhnev оролцлоо. Баярлалаа.